worked on an organic farm. I became a teacher so that I could teach people how to grow plants and their own food. And now I own my own landscape design company. And through all this whole life of growing plants, I have learned that in order to be the very best plant mom I can be, soil is absolutely everything. So I want you guys to hold your hand out. And now imagine in the palm of your hand, you have a palm full of soil. You are now holding more living organisms in your hand than there are humans on this planet. That's amazing, right? Okay, so bacteria, fungus, protozoa, nematodes, they're all microscopic. You have to use a microscope to see them, but they're in this bustling world in the soil beneath our feet, and they are doing incredible jobs every day, and they're really freaking cool. So in order to explain how important microbes are, I think it's important to take you on the journey from dirt to soil. So I want you to imagine that you are back in 1930s Oklahoma Dust Bowl, okay? So you're sitting around the campfire with your friends, you're warm and cozy, like Grace the Rat style, and the wind is blowing dirt in your face, in your teeth. It's terrible. How did we get here to Dust Bowl? So it didn't help that there was a huge drought going on, but we also were trying to feed a lot of hungry mouths. And we wanted to do it as efficiently as possible. So what we did was this. We used a tractor and a plow. Seems like a really great idea because you don't need a lot of labor to run a tractor and a plow, and you end up with this nice, really fluffy soil. It's churning up the weeds. It seems really great, right? Well, imagine you are a soil microorganism, and you're living in soil. You've got your happy soil life. You've got your happy micro friends and your happy micro family, and you've got a really fulfilling job doing really important things for the world. You have this crazy active sex life. You're making like thousands of babies a day. So life seems pretty great, right? Well, now imagine this tractor tornado comes through and demolishes your town. And now you're displaced. You've lost your friends and your family. Most of them are probably dead. You have no job anymore. You can't get established because every time you're trying to rebuild your town, the tractor tornado comes through again. So that's dirt. So dirt has no stability, there's no relationships, there's no interconnection between the life. It's just dirt. We don't want dirt. So imagine that the tractor breaks down and we give nature a chance to rebuild. And so the first thing that comes in will be bacteria. And bacteria is the least likely to have died from the tractor tornado. Number one, because it's the smallest and it's harder to chop up. Number two, because it's the most abundant. So there's tons and tons of bacteria. And so bacteria looks like this underneath the microscope, just tiny little dots. But I want you to imagine it like this. In the microbe world, or a game of PacMan, there's two major elements that kind of fuel the microbe world. You have carbon, and you can think of those as the little dots of PacMan. Carbon's pretty abundant, it's really easy to get, nobody's really fighting over it. And then there's nitrogen, and that's the blinking big dots. So nitrogen is a little trickier. There's not as much, things can fight over it, and everybody wants it. And bacteria, because there are so many of them, and they're really efficient at getting nitrogen, gobble up the nitrogen first. Okay, so now you're PacMan, or you're bacteria, and you've gobbled up a ton of carbon and nitrogen. So you're full, you've had a satisfying meal, and then nature calls. So, I'm going to stop you here for a minute and tell you that I grew up in a household where we were not allowed to say the word fart, but for some reason poop was fair game. And so my siblings and I spent a lot of creative energy coming up with the world's finest comments, commentary, and jokes on poop. And so one of my favorite things about Microbes is that I get to talk about poop, like a lot. And poop, my friends, is seriously what is making this entire world go around. So, okay, bacteria has to take a dump, right? So, the cool thing about bacteria poop is it's like this poop glue. And why is that important? Well, they have individual soil particles. And when they don't have anything to hold on to, it's really easy to blow away, like the dust bowl, or to wash away the erosion. So what happens is the bacteria has this poo glue, and when it poops, it glues soil particles together. So it makes these things called microaggregates. And what's really great about this is now the soil particles are holding on to each other, so it's harder to blow away, it's harder to wash away. And then in between the particles, now those are these little pockets where you can hold water and you can hold oxygen. So now our dirt is building soil structure, it's able to act like a sponge and hold water and air in it. So we're getting better. Next up we have fungus, or fungi, or fungi. And you're probably most familiar with a mushroom with fungus, and mushrooms are the fruit of fungus. But this is hyphae, and hyphae is like where all the action is, and it's underneath the soil. And it's kind of like the equivalent of fungus roots. This is what fungus looks like underneath the microscope. But I want you to think of it like the cowboy or the cowgirl of the microbe world. So one really cool function of fungus is that it is a really good carbon sequesterer. So it keeps a lot of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and stores it in the soil because it takes a lot of carbon to grow the hyphae bodies. And so instead of it being in the air, it's now locked away in the soil. Another really great thing that it does is it also poops. And so we have bacteria, or PacMan, or Mrs. PacMan, over here pooping and making microaggregates, right? Now, fungus, with its poo glue, uses it like a lasso, and it lassos all of the microaggregates and then makes macroaggregates. Now, we have all this soil that's really sticky, it's not blowing away in the wind, it's not washing away in the water, and look at all those pockets for air and for water to get trapped in. So now we're really building soil structure. So we have soil structure, we have oxygen, we have water, we could use some more nutrients. That's where these guys come in. So this is amoeba, this is cilia, this is flagellate, and they look like that under the microscope. But you can think of them as the ghost of the PacMan game. So the ghosts are running around trying to eat bacteria, and that's great because inside of the PacMan who ate the nitrogen dot, the protozoa eats, and then they have more nitrogen. So in order to really understand how important they are, we need to do a little bit of protozoa poop math. So put on your math caps. Protozoa, or the ghosts of the PacMan game, need 30 dots of carbon and 1 dot of nitrogen for a satisfying meal. If bacteria, PacMan, or Mrs. PacMan bodies have 5 dots of carbon and 1 dot of nitrogen in them, how many bacteria does a protozoa need to be full of carbon? All right, 6. Yes, so 6 bacteria, or PacMan, or Mrs. PacMan, need to be eaten to be full of carbon. All right, follow-up question. Protozoa can only handle 1 dot of nitrogen for every 30 dots of carbon. How many extra nitrogen does the protozoa have inside it? Who's got me? Math wizard over here. 5, thank you. So that means that's extra nitrogen that they poop out. So what's really cool about this is now this nitrogen is available for other microbes to take it up. tomatoes and your trees and your shrubs, anything that's not a weed. So we want nitrogen pooped out from the protozoa. Another thing that poops out nitrogen are nematodes. So they're nutrient cyclers as well. So nematodes can eat bacteria, fungus, protozoa, and other nematodes. And every time they eat any of those, they're pooping out extra nitrogen. This picture is really cool because not only can nematodes eat fungus, but fungus can eat other nematodes. So this is fungal hyphae right here, and what it does, and it has an extra little fungal circle right here, and there's 3 special cells, and when a nematode goes through the trap, it's pressure sensitive, and it tells the 3 cells to fill with water, and they pressurize, and then they strangle the nematode, and then it sucks out all its guts, and it's really cool. So, I think that's cool, but I think this part's the coolest. Alright, so plants, I love plants. Plants are doing their plant thing, doing the photosynthesis, so they're using solar energy to take carbon dioxide and water and make sugars. So they use those sugars to feed themselves and to grow themselves and to have functions. So they actually also can take up to 60% of the sugars that they make and they feed the microbes. So why would they do that? If I asked you to go into your kitchen and make me something with carbohydrates, sugar, and protein, what might you make?
Cake.
Jeez. Cake. I heard cake, thank you. That leads me right where I wanted to go. So a plant can tailor its recipe based on the microbe it's trying to attract. So it might make cakes, it might make cookies, it might make donuts, it might make brownies in the microbe world. So it can attract the type of microbe that it wants, and here's why it's doing that. So here's cake. The bacteria wants to come and eat the cake, and so it eats the cake, and then guess who else wants to eat the bacteria? Protozoa. And the protozoa come in, they eat the bacteria, and then they poop right by the roots, right where the plant wants its nutrients. So certain microbes can bring in certain nutrients, and that's why the plant tailors its recipe based on which nutrient it needs and which microbe it's trying to attract. Cool, right? Plants also have a really cool relationship with something called mycorrhizal fungus, and they're like the Uber Eats drivers of the microbe world. So what happens is the plant needs a nutrient, and then it orders up with Uber Eats, and it says, hey, I need some iron. So the mycorrhizal fungus goes out and finds the iron. And what's also really cool is it's also like go-go gadget arms for plant roots. Where plant roots can only go so far, and then the mycorrhizal fungus comes in and extends the plant roots, and then gets the nutrient, brings it back to the plant, and then the plant tips it with carbohydrates and sugars that it made through photosynthesis. Another really cool relationship that plants have with microbes is nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And this is kind of like a landlord-tenant situation where the bacteria gets to live inside the plant roots in this little nodule. It's like a cozy little apartment for the bacteria. And so now those pesky little PacMan ghosts aren't able to eat the bacteria because it's got this sweet apartment. And to pay rent, what happens is nitrogen and a special type of, or this bacteria, a special type of bacteria has this like superpower where it can take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil and turn it into a nitrogen dot. So it's pretty much like finding a special level in PacMan where you can literally create the nitrogen dots out of thin air. So it's a pretty sweet deal. Okay, I hope that this has made you interested in microbes and that you are wanting to really help out your microbes in your soil. So here are the top 3 ways you can help them. The first one, don't till your yard. You want to disturb it as little as possible. Don't bring in the tractor tornado. Let your microbes have their microbe life, and they will build up healthy soil that makes your life a lot easier. And it seems counterintuitive because you're like, I have this compacted soil, and now it's going to be all fluffy after I till it. But what you're doing is creating long-term damage from just a short-term solution. Susceptible to chemicals. So you might have a fungus in your yard that you're trying to kill, a bad one, and when you spray that fungus, you kill it, but you also kill all the good microbes. And if you are fostering good microbes instead, kill bad fungus for you. So you really want to build up the health of your soil so they'll take care of all the bad ones for you. So pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, any of the sides, they're killing everything, so don't use them. And then also synthetic fertilizers are adding salts to your soil, and they'll kill your microbes as well. Alright, the best thing that you can do is compost. If I could get everyone here to compost, I feel like I could save the world. So, no matter what your situation is, small apartment to giant piece of land, there is a situation for you, and I will do more talks on compost later, so you can follow me on social media and I'll let you know when those are. But composting. So what's happening is your compost scraps are full of beneficial microbes. They're coating all the surfaces on these scraps. So then you take them to your compost pile, you now have inoculated your compost pile with a ton of beneficial microbes. And when all of the scraps decompose, you're creating this like source of life, this substance that can hold a lot of water, it holds a lot of nutrients, and it's habitat for the microbes to live in. So this is where like the nitrogen dots of the PacMan game are coming from. So the more compost you can add to your soil, the better, the more diverse you can make it. The microbes, the better, and the happier your soil will be, and the less work you're going to have to do. It's missing. And that you don't treat your soil like dirt. So thank you very much. Any questions? Yeah. She asked if you put your compost on top if you don't want to till, since you don't want to till. And yeah, that's a great way to do it, and the microbes will till it in for you. And if you have earthworms, they're like the champions of natural tilling. So yeah, just put your compost right on top. Yeah. Question?
Yeah, so you said not to till your grass, but having that landscaping, so a trimix with topsoil, peat moss, and manure is something that's common that you lay down and mix with soil in order for the sod to lay well. So is that a negative process in the long run?
Are you tilling it in, or are you just putting it on top of the soil, on the grass?
Tilling it in.
So his question was, he does landscaping, or has done landscaping, and he has a mix of topsoil, compost, and
topsoil, manure, and peat moss.
Topsoil, manure, and peat moss, and he's asking if it's bad that he's tilling it in. So it's great that you're adding this organic material to the soil, but if you could just put it on top and then let nature till it in, then you'd be better off.
It's so much fun driving.
Okay. your plants, if you incorporate beneficial microbes, they will fight the bad stuff. So adding compost to your, finished compost to your houseplants is a great idea. And worm castings is like the miracle solution for adding microbes to your soil. So if you want to compost using red wiggler worms, that is a great way. So if you make compost tea, yeah, keep doing that.
Worms.
You're good.
I think you lost her before.
Question.
The worms. Yeah. But the worms kind of put her out of being red. I don't mind.
He has a piece of land with dead soil, dirt on there, and he wants to put compost on there, but he's afraid it'll get solarized. The sun will kill the microbes. And if you so the best thing you can do really is add a ton of compost and then put mulch on top of that, or some sort of plant cover. Or plant seeds and cover crop seeds so that you have plant life feeding the microbes in that compost, and then the microbes are feeding the plants, making more plants, more microbes, and it just keeps going on and on. Yeah.